Batman for the NES, released by Sunsoft in 1989, is one of the more iconic action games to have graced the 8-bit console. Based on Tim Burton's 1989 Batman movie, the game blends side-scrolling platforming with beat-em-up mechanics, offering a gritty portrayal of Gotham's protector. Despite some of the challenges inherent in 8-bit games, Batman manages to captivate with its atmosphere, tight gameplay, and unique features that set it apart from many other licensed games of its time. But how well does it hold up after all these years? Let's dive in. From the moment you press Start, it's clear that Batman takes advantage of the NES's limited hardware in impressive ways. The game's graphics capture the dark, brooding atmosphere of Gotham City with a rich sense of detail, especially for its time. Batman himself is portrayed in a surprisingly sleek manner for an 8-bit game, and the environments do a great job of reflecting the gritty urban setting from the film. The backgrounds are often dark, with large looming skyscrapers and neon lights giving the world a sense of depth. Enemies are well designed, and while they're mostly standard thugs, their animations make each fight feel distinct. The standout in terms of art design has to be the bosses, which truly stand out visually compared to regular enemies. From the Joker's henchmen to larger, more intimidating figures, the bosses are a treat for the eyes, evoking a sense of power and danger. As for the soundtrack, Batman on the NES truly shines. The music is one of the game's most memorable aspects, with an iconic, pulsating synth score that mimics the tone of Danny Elfman's original film score. The opening theme is instantly recognizable, and the music throughout the stages is energetic, yet appropriately dark. It doesn't just sound good, it enhances the game's atmosphere, creating a constant sense of tension and urgency as Batman battles through Gotham. At its core, Batman is a side-scrolling action platformer with some beat-em-up elements. It's structured in a series of stages where Batman must defeat various enemies, solve some minor puzzles, and take down a big boss at the end of each level. The controls are tight and responsive, making the gameplay smooth and fluid, which is essential for any good action game. Batman's main attacks are his punches and his powerful Batarang, which plays an important role throughout the game. The Batarang can be upgraded as you progress, and its versatility allows for both close range and ranged combat, giving players flexibility in how they approach different scenarios. The ability to use it against enemies from a distance adds a tactical layer to the game, especially when faced with hordes of enemies or bosses that can overwhelm you if you're not careful. The platforming sections in the game are relatively straightforward, but they offer a decent challenge. You'll often have to leap between platforms while avoiding enemies, spikes, and other environmental hazards. Batman's jumps are well designed, although they can sometimes feel a little stiff, making some precision platforming sequences a tad frustrating, especially when dealing with moving platforms or narrow spaces. However, these moments never feel impossible, and with practice, you'll get used to the game's physics. One of the more unique mechanics is the use of different weapons and gadgets that Batman can acquire during the game. You start with your basic Batarangs, but you can also pick up items like grenades, bat bombs, and various other tools that help you overcome tough enemies or obstacles. These items are often limited, so you have to think carefully about when to use them. The resource management aspect keeps things engaging, forcing you to weigh your options as you make your way through each level. One of the first things you'll notice about Batman is its challenge. This isn't a game that holds your hand. You'll face waves of enemies, tricky platforming sequences, and punishing bosses that require both skill and patience. The game can be brutally hard at times, especially as you get further into the levels. For example, in Stage 1, the first few enemies are relatively easy to dispatch, but you soon encounter tougher opponents that require quick reflexes and careful use of your Batarangs. The difficulty ramps up as you progress, with later stages featuring more complex platforming challenges and enemies that are more difficult to defeat. Boss battles are another highlight of the difficulty. Each boss is a unique experience, and each requires different tactics to defeat. Some are relatively straightforward, while others demand quick reflexes and careful planning to exploit their weaknesses. The first boss, for example, is a large mechanical suit that fires missiles. It's a test of your patience and timing to avoid its attacks while landing blows with your batarangs. Later bosses require more strategy, forcing you to adapt your tactics on the fly. While the difficulty can be overwhelming at times, it's never unfair. The game gives you enough opportunities to strategize, and with each death, you learn a little more about what works and what doesn't. This makes each victory feel earned and satisfying, especially when you overcome difficult sections or bosses. Level design. The level design in Batman is quite strong. The game is divided into multiple stages, each with its own unique set of challenges and enemies. The stages range from dark, industrial areas to high-rise rooftops, all of which feel like different facets of Gotham. The levels are well-paced, balancing combat, platforming, and puzzle solving in a way that keeps things fresh. The enemies are varied too, with different types requiring different strategies to defeat. In addition to the standard platforming and combat sections, you'll occasionally encounter sections where you have to use your gadgets to overcome obstacles. These brief, puzzle-like moments help break up the action and give you a chance to think strategically about how to progress. However, one common complaint is the lack of a save feature or password system. This means that if you run out of lives, you'll need to start from the beginning of the stage, which can be frustrating for players who want to progress without worrying about constantly redoing difficult sections. Boss battles. The boss battles in Batman are a highlight of the game. Each one is unique, requiring players to adapt their strategies. From the grotesque mechanical suits to the menacing, often surreal enemies Batman faces, the bosses are a real treat. The best part is that the difficulty spikes right when you encounter each major boss. Some of these encounters test your patience, timing, and skill with the various gadgets and combat mechanics Batman has at his disposal. As the bosses get more difficult, you'll have to be more methodical and precise in your approach, rewarding players who take the time to learn enemy patterns and exploit weaknesses. The soundtrack and final thoughts. It's impossible to talk about Batman on the NES without mentioning its incredible soundtrack. Composed by Naoki Kodaka, the music is haunting and atmospheric, perfectly matching the dark themes of Gotham City. The opening theme is a standout, immediately evoking the sense of urgency and grim determination Batman is known for. Throughout the game, the soundtrack maintains a level of intensity that pulls players deeper into the experience, even during the most intense fights and challenging platforming sequences. In conclusion, Batman on the NES stands out as one of the better licensed games from the era. With solid, responsive controls, challenging gameplay, and an incredible soundtrack, it delivers a fun and immersive experience for fans of the Caped Crusader and platformer enthusiasts alike. Though it can be frustrating at times, the overall experience is rewarding and memorable. If you're a fan of Batman or NES games in general, it's definitely worth revisiting. Whether you're playing it for the first time or reminiscing about childhood memories, Batman on the NES still holds up as a classic action game that embodies the spirit of Gotham's Dark Knight.